Hi, I'm Daniel Roberts, and you're listening to the Giving Town podcast, where we share stories of hope and generosity in our wonderful community of Newberg, Oregon, and the surrounding area. In today's episode, I'm talking to Jerrie Lyda about a project with United as Neighbors called Conversation Groups. In this episode, Jerrie will be sharing what these groups are and the role in promoting civility within our community. This podcast is sponsored by my real estate team, the Driffield Roberts Group, and we're a family real estate team with Premier Property Group here in town. And I make this podcast because I love this town. I love highlighting the great people and organizations of this community and projects just like the conversation groups. And I love helping people move here too. So I also have a YouTube channel that educates people on the more real estate aspects of living in Newberg and buying a home, selling a home, that kind of thing. So if you're interested in that, you can check out our YouTube channel, which is linked in the description below. And with that, let's get to my conversation with Jerrie. Well, Jerrie, thank you so much for coming and joining me on the podcast today. I look forward to talking to you about the community conversations, your involvement with the Civility Project, United as Neighbors. I know you do quite a few different things here in town. So look forward to having a discussion with you today.
Thank you, Daniel. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so first of all, now you've been involved a lot just with the community conversations and getting these going under, I know for some people it still is probably a little confusing, like the United as Neighbors umbrella, and there's a lot of projects within that. We can maybe get into that a little bit. But with the group specifically, can you share how it came to be, kind of what your journey was getting these started, and I guess just sharing the genesis story, I guess, of how those came to be?
Sure. Specifically, the United as Neighbors, we started that, a group of people hoping to promote civility in our community, started meeting in the fall of 2021, and eventually that group chose the name United as Neighbors. It's just a collection of individuals that are concerned about the, you could say, temperature in town, with disagreements creating a lot of trauma to long-standing friendships and relationships, even within families. And so that group put together a project of pursuing greater civility in town, and one of the projects that we landed on is called Conversation Groups. And that was a project that I took the lead on, and since then, two other gentlemen, Busch and Paul Blattner, are co-leading. So the three of us are leading this project. And so that's basically the genesis of both groups. United as Neighbors started a year and a half ago, and then the conversation groups probably started about 6 months ago.
So can you distinguish kind of what the difference is between, in a sense you kind of did, but what the difference really is between United as Neighbors and then how the conversation groups are under that same umbrella in a sense, but are also different?
Sure. The United as Neighbors group would be almost like an overall umbrella covering multiple projects. Various projects like the Civility Pledge, or there was a booth at the, now I'm forgetting the name of it.
The Old Fashioned Festival.
Old Fashioned Festival, thank you. Encouraging civility and seeking input from people in the community. And the Conversation Groups is another one of the projects of United as Neighbors. The Conversation Group specifically is looking at how do we change what's happening in the community. Can we actually get better at learning how to talk with people? In the past, people could communicate about political differences and disagreements without having arguments or personal attacks. Can we get back there? Can we get to that place again where we can learn to discuss things and understand where each other is coming from, and actually recognize, okay, we do have disagreements without attacking each other? Mm-hmm. And so Conversation Groups is hoping to achieve that.
And so what does the process look like when you're actually having these groups? How do these conversations actually go to do what you're hoping they'll accomplish?
So in the first step of the meeting, everybody just has a short 30-second introduction of themselves. Hi, my name's Jerrie. I've been a part of the community for 51 years. I'm excited to be here tonight to get better at learning how to communicate with people. And around the room, we introduce ourselves. The second step is to break up into smaller groups around tables and have a conversation about a topic that is selected for that evening. An example topic might be, how do we address the issue of athletes whose gender identity is different from their biological identity? There would be various opinions on that issue.
Yeah.
And so now each person at the table, 3, 4, 5 people sitting at the table, have the opportunity to communicate with each other to try to understand, for example, Daniel, what do you believe on this issue? And as I'm listening to you, I might ask, what is your basis for that belief? Why do you believe that? Instead of just looking for the moment when you stop talking so that I can start attacking. We don't want to do that, but that's easy. Everybody
just the gut reaction.
Exactly. And so we're working really to help people understand the value of listening, asking a question and then listening to understand why someone believes what they believe so well that you could actually rephrase it back to them and see, do I understand you correctly? Is this why you believe that? And continue that process of seeking to understand before trying to be understood. That is something that Stephen Covey taught as one of his principles of leaders, is that they seek first to understand and then to be understood, which I think is foundational to help us learn to get along and talk about difficult political subjects.
So in these groups, you have people that then have a very different opinions. This is not conservative or liberal, Republican, Democrat. It's not one side or the other. It's both sides coming together. Is that correct?
That is correct. In fact, we work to try to have a diversity of opinions at the same table. If everybody at the table has the exact same opinion, then the exercise is kind of lost. Right. We really do want to bring people to the table and match them up, pair them up with someone who has a different opinion so they can work at learning how to discuss this issue, managing their own emotions, not kind of devolving into rhetoric bashing, but instead actually listening and trying to understand each other. And we think that does actually promote more understanding and civility. We're not saying, this is important, we're not saying whatever you believe and whatever I believe, we need to find the dead center middle of the two and we both have to get to that spot and change our beliefs. That's not what we're saying. Some people think that this is about compromising your belief system, but it isn't. It's actually learning how to communicate about our belief system and understand where each other is coming from in a way that isn't attacking each other, but is actually civil.
And I think that's actually, well, obviously I agree with the whole premise. That's part of the reason, one of the reasons I have interviews with people on both sides of the spectrum is I've learned growing up with one political mindset extremely far on one side, and then I'd say I'm much more middle of the road now, is because I've had so many conversations and I go, oh, that's why you believe what you believe. Okay, I may still disagree with it, but it's when you understand why someone believes what they do, it brings a lot more humanity into the picture. And I think it's the easiest thing. Actually, the very, very first episode I did when this was still called the El Peace Project was with a gentleman here in town that operates a that works with people on the street up in Portland called Home PDX, Bruce Arnold. The very first episode was called Humanizing the Other. The whole point of that is the first thing that people do when they have a disagreement is they try to dehumanize the person. That's what the Nazis did. In order to justify killing millions of Jews, they first had to make them at a subhuman level. And I think that's what often happens is we try to make someone seem so horrible, and I've seen it both sides. When you attack the character first, then it's easier to just kind of throw the entire person under the bus. But when you have a deep level of respect for someone, it's a lot harder to, bash them and their beliefs. You may still disagree, but you're not going to go around slandering someone if you have a deep respect for them. All that to say, I think that's really important to I mean, just what you're saying is to seek first to understand, but really seek to understand, which is uncomfortable because you're having your own beliefs challenged. And like Brian Groves, when I interviewed him, he was talking about you get that itchy feeling and you're kind of like, I don't like this. I want to get away from this. It's just easy to kind of, get mad and walk away. So anyway, thank you for sharing that. I think, obviously you can tell I have my own strong opinions on how we treat each other and talk about these things.
Yeah.
In your opinion, why are these groups so important for Newberg? Like, how is this going to go from just a few people talking about this to actually doing more for our entire community?
Well, I think the reason that I see it as important is I've been observing people that I have known for decades and decades that I grew up with, that I've known my whole life, friends from college, all the way through, good people that I am noticing that there's a lot of trauma in town, and there's so much hurt and agony that, my heart is broken. This is home, and seeing this much pain and trauma in the lives of people that I care deeply for, it has spurred me to not be okay with doing nothing. Mm-hmm. It's time to step forward and lead and do something to try to help, to try to be part of the solution in this community. So that is the why for me. Mm-hmm. And also, I guess you could say, what are we facing? If it's not a small threat. As you look around our nation right now, there are people that are, as you mentioned, if you can vilify a group of people, it's the first step in justifying massive types of incivility. There basically are 5 steps that I see to incivility. And
by incivility, can you describe that? I know many people are familiar with Civility, the Civility Project, and the opposite of that, incivility.
Yeah.
But just kind of a layman's term, what do you really mean on a tangible level by incivility?
Well, you could use a general word like incivility, or you could be very specific with types of actions.
And maybe by these 5 steps, you'll kind of explain what that is.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah. But it leads towards things that makes the news, that just aren't good things, where personal property is being destroyed, where you see just some really horrible things. And you have to ask the question, how did they get to that point where they thought it was a good idea or justifiable to do these things, destroying buildings and personal property and different things? Why would they think that's an okay thing to do? And I would suggest that starts the very beginning with the mindset that what I believe is true and all good people agree with me. People tend to only talk to people that they agree with, and that further entrenches that sort of a mindset or that argument that the way I view life, my worldview is right, and only the only people that are good people are ones who agree with me, and everyone else, they are off marginally or greatly, off in the weeds, or just flat out horrible people because they believe a full set of wrong things, so to speak.
So that's kind of the first step. And maybe another way to look at these two is, if you're having these thoughts, maybe examine yourself and see, okay, do I feel this way and think this way? And I know for that, sometimes I'm like, oh man, I kind of do have these set of strong beliefs, and it's easy to say that, well, I believe this is true for a reason because it's right. And if someone disagrees, especially with a really deeply held core value that, they just don't, it's one thing to think people are wrong, but I guess another thing to say if they disagree with me, they're not a good person.
Yeah. And you were starting to say, and I want to repeat this, that these 5 steps are what we don't want to happen.
Right.
This is diagnosing the problem in our community. These aren't steps I'm encouraging people to take, but what you and I are encouraging people to do is to do a lot of self-examination. Am I going through these 5 steps?
Kind of like you go to the doctor and hey, your blood pressure is twice what it needs to be. There's a problem.
Right.
That's kind of what, and I guess the irony is these things will elevate your blood pressure. But
yes.
Okay, so that's step 1, is thinking that people who only good people or only people who agree with you are good people. Everyone else is a bad person. So then
Right.
what's step two?
Step two is, we just call it malicious motives. Judge the other side as having malicious motives. Like in 2016, there was a classic moment where Hillary Clinton labeled Trump supporters as a basket of deplorables and describing them as racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, and Islamophobic. Statements that move opponents to the farthest sphere of the political spectrum. They are all socialists, or they're all racists, or they're all fascists. If we can move the opponents way over to the other end of the political spectrum and now characterize them as all having malicious motives, then it's a lot easier to down the road justify big acts of incivility against these people because they deserve it.
Right.
That's the mindset. And again, I don't encourage this at all. It's a wrong way of going about life, and it leads to problems. But again, that's what's behind the scenes that's causing someone to do these things, is they're saying they deserve it. They have malicious motives. They're horrible.
It's kind of an unwillingness to give someone the benefit of the doubt.
Yes.
And I've found this out actually in several cases, even with individuals here in town. I'd hear stories, and I think this is maybe another thing, is like when you hear a story about someone did something or someone voted this way or someone made this decision, it's easy to go, wow, on the face of it, like that seems pretty messed up. Like how could you do that unless unless you feel this way? But then in actually talking to some of these individuals, learning, okay, I may still disagree with your decision, but the heart behind it was actually good. Like they did it with a good intent, even though the result maybe wasn't the desired outcome that maybe I thought it should be. But I think it helps to just go through that process and question, okay, am I vilifying this person, or am I willing to give them the benefit of the doubt until I have a personal conversation? And it's actually extremely difficult because you feel very uncomfortable going into someone where you're like, my mindset is I can't see how this person isn't a bad person, and I'm willing to go and have a conversation right now, which feels very threatening to me because I don't know what's going to happen. That takes a lot of guts, and it is difficult, but it's important. And if you're not willing to do that, just maybe don't spread the rumor anymore until you've maybe just don't spread the rumors at all.
That would be
another option.
That would be a very high calling life. How should I say this? You're taking the high road if you would approach life that way, like you just said. That if you probably shouldn't be talking about somebody if you haven't gone and asked them, hey, tell me more about this. Why were you thinking this? I mean, it actually is more like gossip. If you and I decide to start talking right now about somebody and we haven't given them the benefit of the doubt or even gone and talked to them, tell me more about why you voted this way. Tell me why you think this is a good approach to lead our city or lead the schools. If we haven't talked with them about that, and we're sitting here sharing back and forth, can you believe they did this? Man, what horrible people. Really, we're just settling in as gossips to each other. And Solomon wrote a lot of proverbs about gossips, and it is powerful. I have realized that gossip is a much more painful and powerful tool and very destructive than I ever imagined. In the last couple years, we've experienced that as gossip has gone around the town. It's very destructive. Solomon said, Proverbs 16:28, a perverse person stirs up conflict and a gossip separates close friends. We have seen that, Daniel, and it all came from gossip. There's multiple other statements about gossip, but one of the things that I'd like to share, I actually thinking about today, I had a dream last night and I woke up with this in my mind this morning, and it's from the book of James. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. All kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind, but no human can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. So
Well, that's encouraging.
yeah, no, I tell you, yeah. So that's not a very uplifting thing, but it's a reminder to me as a human in this town. Guard what I say. Be careful what you say, because it can really hurt people. When we are face to face, I'm sitting here with you face to face. I feel a natural sense of decency that I'm not going to say something harsh, to you, because that would be totally unkind.
And I'll just edit it out anyway.
And you would edit. True, the power of technology.
Yeah, really. Hey, why? Anyway.
But if I'm behind a keyboard on social media, it seems as though the resistance to say some bad things goes away. And we've noticed that really in our community. There have been some powerfully painful things that have been said on social media. Some people call it the keyboard warriors, but there's this willingness to engage in some very painful conversations, accusations, hateful rhetoric, and I'll tell you, I don't think a lot of good things are coming from social media in that regard in our community.
Yeah, I don't want to get onto that because I obviously feel very strongly in the same way. I think it's kind of what people think is a community discussion, but really it's when you're in the safety of your own home. I would love some of those conversations and comment threads. If you could get all those people in a room, I think that'd be good, but I don't think people would be willing to do that. Without getting too much into that, so that's step 2. What's step 3?
Step 3 is reinforce.
Step 3 of what not to.
And again, what not to do.
Yeah, steps. It almost sounds like instructions. It's really like the steps of examining yourself. So listen with the idea of, okay, you've examined yourself with these 2 ways. Step 3 is examine yourself for if you're doing this.
Yeah. So the third step that leads people to big egregious acts of incivility would be to reinforce and simplify. This is basically when people will repeat the malicious motives at every opportunity, creating a short, snappy slogan that's easy to remember and repeat. Reinforce, that there's this malicious motive, that our political opponents have this malicious motive. That's what's driving them. Reinforcing that builds a lot of emotion in people, that it's gearing them up to be ready to do something.
So then step 4.
Step 4 is become outraged.
Which is a clear step from the previous.
It is. Yeah. It's really taken a big step up. If you have reinforced the other side that they have these horrible motives, malicious motives, if you reinforce it enough, you will become outraged. You'll take deep personal offense at the malicious motives of the other people. You'll develop extreme emotions, and you see yourself as basically someone standing in the gap. You want to stir other people up on social media and get that echo chamber bouncing with emotion.
Yeah.
Now I said you want to. Now that is what happens. We don't want to do that. And as you know, I'm encouraging people not to do that. But step 4 is critical. If people build up that emotion and really deeply stir up other people, that leads to step 5. If step 4 doesn't get to that pitch, if someone calms people down, they don't get to step 5. We want people to calm people down.
Yeah.
Calm down the echo chamber so it's not so toxic. Calm people down. And then step 5 is where people attack. That is where people organize and plan an attack on opponents. They spread information on social media about how terrible these people are, and they begin a campaign to cancel them. They basically do what they can to harm a business and choose the business, target that business, and encourage people to cancel them and never do business with them. They will even find people at a restaurant, public officials, and yell at them until they take away their embarrassed family and leave in shame. People will organize marching in front of homes. They'll dox people and then march in front of their homes and shouting. We've seen that across the country. We saw that with the Supreme Court justices. We've seen it in Portland. I don't know that we've seen that particular step in Newberg. I sure hope we don't.
I'm pretty sure that has happened to some people.
It has.
Stories.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's organizing a call to organizing people to call employers to get them fired from their privately held jobs. And that has happened in Newberg as well. A lot of people don't know that happened, but it did happen.
There were a lot of things, and on both sides. And I think most sides only think it happened to their side. And I hear a lot of stories like, no one ever did anything to the other side. And then I hear the other side say exactly the same thing. And I think people don't realize how dual-sided this was. And I think part of that is like recognizing, like I would mention like, hey, this happened. Like, well, you don't know what they did, and they did this and this. And like, yeah, well, that doesn't justify it. It doesn't matter on either side.
Right.
And I think a lot of times we justify. I mean, it's kind of like your kids. Like someone takes a toy, then someone pushes them, and then someone yells, and then someone hits them in the face. It's like, well, they did this, and they did this, and that's kind of like, this is 3, 4, and 5-year-old childish behavior. Honestly, to justify wrong action. We all know 2 wrongs don't make a right, but it's easy to forget that when you're in the middle of feeling an injustice and feeling, well, now that justifies us to then take even more drastic measures. It's kind of like in one of the original Spider-Man movies when he's like, well, I didn't start the fight. He's like, yeah, well, we sure finished it. That's kind of the mentality that we sometimes have. Okay, so that's 5 things not to do, 5 steps or processes to recognize in yourself. If you're doing those things, 1, stop, because it's not helping anyone. It leads to nothing good. But how can we actually create change? Like, what are the steps that we can actually do to lead to civility and kindness and kind of undo some of this harm that's been done?
Yeah, so that asking that question, how can we create change, is what caused me to, back in the fall of 21, join meetings that was the beginning of the United as Neighbors group. Our goal is to encourage civility in the community. And from that, Dan Busch and Paul Blattner and myself started the conversation groups. And what we're trying to accomplish in the conversation groups is to give a opportunity, a platform where people can sit together at a table and learn to have productive conversations instead of bashing others with emotional rhetoric. We want to give opportunity for productive conversations. It's difficult to maybe just go out on the street and say, hey, you look like you and me might disagree. Let's try to have a good conversation. So maybe we need to facilitate that. So once a month, we're having meetings where we'll have anywhere from 10 to 20 people. I think we've had a little more than 20 people on one occasion show up to sit down and work together to get better at having a productive conversation, learning how to manage our own emotions.
Yeah.
Learning how to kind of quiet, as you'd mentioned, the tingly feeling of like, I'm uncomfortable with this. Learning how to be okay with that and ask questions to understand where they are coming from. And mutually, when that is done, you build a stronger relationship, even if you disagree.
Yeah. And this is kind of maybe a tough question, because I 100% believe in what the community conversations are, what they're about, what they're doing. And then the question I have is, okay, now what? Now what? With 20 out of about even more than 20,000 people here in the town, there's 99.9% of people who aren't coming to these meetings, which can, in one sense, can be kind of discouraging. Like, why bother? I still think it's important to do, but how do you move from 0.1% to then expanding that and helping? And what I like to say is, the reason I named this podcast "The Giving Town" is it's an identity statement. I believe we're a generous town, a kind town. I believe that's the core of who we are. And then going back to my several months ago, my interview with Denise Bacon, God rest her soul. We need people like her, and I hope her legacy continues. But the whole idea was remembering who we are, and maybe it's just kind of a subtle, but I think in some way significant way of, we're not trying to change and become different. We're trying to change to get back to who our true identity is in this town. So that said, what would you say in terms of, do you have thoughts or visions going beyond, okay, 20 people, to what can we do then to create greater change, more scalable change?
Sure. I think it's the pebble in the pond concept, where you can create a ripple effect. Mm-hmm. And so each of the people that come to these conversation group meetings, they have an impact on other people. And they tend to be people who do have an influence. They have an influence in maybe their household, maybe their neighborhood, maybe their church or place of employment, or all of the above. So anytime you have a beginning of something like this, it's the pebble in the pond. And I think of the story of that little boy who was out on the beach, and he was throwing the sand dollars into the ocean. There's all these sand dollars, hundreds and hundreds of them, and he's throwing them one by one. And a man came up to him and said, there's way too many for you to do. You might as well give up. And the little boy said, yeah, but it makes a world of difference for this one sand dollar. And he throws it in the ocean. And so I would say that, it's a small beginning. And, 20 out of 25,000 in our community, and then several thousand in Dundee as well. But, we are doing what we can. We're doing the best we can. So, anybody listening to this podcast, I'd encourage you to join us. Join us to make a difference. Join us so that you yourself can get better at this. And then you can make a difference in the people you interact with.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think that's exactly right. So we've talked about several of the things that lead to incivility, some of the things that then can create meaningful change. And I think maybe just go over some tangible steps of the steps that are kind of the opposite of the incivility. You got some more steps, right, about some like tangible things that we can do to create meaningful change and produce the results we actually want.
Yes. Yeah, I would say that one of the main things we can do, this is actually a scripture from James as well. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. That we all find ourselves at one time or another, even the most calm and level-headed people can find themselves feeling like they're very angry about something. I would say that would be one thing that all of us can do, is be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. In a conversation group setting, when you are listening to people, I would suggest we ask them, tell me why you believe that, and then really listen. Mm-hmm. Take time to listen. I think maybe all of us have moments where we're in an argument with, whether it's a sibling, a family member, a neighbor, whoever it might be. We don't truly listen to the words they say. We're just waiting for them to stop talking so that we can bash them with our comment that we're sitting there waiting to hit them with. Mm. That doesn't lead to a good, productive conversation. It usually just riles people up even more, including yourself. If we listen with an intent to understand them and ask them questions so that we can understand them really well, where they're coming from, that changes me. Mm-hmm. That makes me a different listener. It changes the way I think. And then there's an opportunity for me to say, I really appreciate you telling me that. So you're saying this, am I right? And if they understand, they now actually feel understood. There's a bond that's created. It doesn't mean I agree with you or with someone mm-hmm. else, but there is a bond of understanding. And then there's the reciprocal opportunity for that person to say, so you have a different opinion? And I say, well, yes, I actually do. And it's a thoughtful one. It's one that I've come to not by chance, but I've thought about it. And here are my reasons that I believe this. And if that person then in stride will say, help me understand. I want to understand why you believe that. Now, again, our bond is strengthened. And mm-hmm. even if we don't agree with each other, we've had a civil conversation. Mm-hmm. We have a stronger relationship because we gave each other the decency of listening. It's a gift of friendship.
Yeah.
So we might leave both having our opinions exactly as they were, but we now have a friendship as well, and we didn't bash each other, and perhaps our blood pressure didn't go up either. So that we could have a little more of that in our community, in my opinion, and that would be a good thing for Newberg.
Yeah. Well, and I think what you were just saying is when when you first seek to understand, it's not a guarantee that they're going to then also seek to understand, but it's much more likely. And it's almost a guarantee if you don't seek to understand, it's almost a guarantee that they will also not. It'll just turn into an argument.
Right.
Both people go away feeling angry. I would almost rephrase that. If you want to be understood, seek to understand. And it may not happen, but if you seek to understand truly, then you're providing the opportunity for them to be able to share and ask without feeling defensive. And then something that they may have felt, that may be what stops some of these things we talked about, is having that conversation. Then their defenses can go down, they can relax, and then seek to, okay, now maybe I should return the favor, seek to understand. And that may be what stops the outrage, that they're like, oh, wow, I had it completely wrong. I assumed this. And now it kind of stops them on their rampage. Whereas we think by beating facts down people's throats, man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of these sayings that have been around for so long. It's just so easy to forget.
Yeah.
And I know we're kind of. Do you have more to share on those steps?
Well, that basically wraps it up. But I guess you could say that if we approach the communication that way, we would be able to disagree without making personal attacks against other people in town. We'd be able to have a conversation about a topic that is divisive without hating each other.
Yeah.
And we would be able to, as a town, lower the temperature and stop some of these acts of incivility where, we have people that are thinking it's a good idea to burn someone's flag, or they're actually, one political leader in town had a pile of human feces dumped in their driveway. Someone had a box of 1,000 condoms mailed to them with a very mean note attached to it. There's just outlandish, silly, painful, and stupid things being done.
Yeah.
I think we as a town can do better than that.
Yeah.
Maybe we can learn how to discuss our differences without going through those 5 steps of incivility and then thinking it is justified to attack others. I would really encourage others to focus on good communication instead of attacking.
So if people are interested in specifically getting involved with one of these conversation groups, how can they get involved?
So there's a website that is called United as Neighbors. If you type in United as Neighbors Newberg, that'll be the first search result, and you could click on that. One of the tabs at United as Neighbors is conversation groups. So far that isn't built out yet, but we're working on it.
Okay.
And we are going to be adding in information there, including the next meeting. We are aiming to meet on the final Wednesday of each month. Okay. So the last Wednesday of each month. In the past, that's when our meetings have been. And if we're able to keep the same meeting schedule, that's our plan going forward. We're meeting at Red Hills Church on 3rd Street at 7 p.m. And it's a very productive time.
Yeah.
It's with like-minded people that are wanting to get better at communicating on topics that we have a high probability of disagreeing on.
And I think it's maybe important to mention, just because it's at a church, it's actually not a Christian event,
Correct.
Right? Like, it's for everyone of any belief.
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, and I think some people are like, oh, it's just one of those Christian things. I don't want to. But I think more people who actually probably are not of the Christian faith or belief system would probably be good to go to provide some diversity, like you were talking about earlier, that's really needed.
Yeah, absolutely. We're grateful that Red Hills is opening up their space. To have a meeting space available for 20 or 30 people, it's not easy to come by, so it's very kind of them to allow us to use their meeting space.
Yeah. And I'll have the link to the United Neighbors page with the conversation groups in there. And then one last question that I like to ask everyone, given your position in town, your history and what you're doing, what gives you hope for the future of Newberg?
I guess what gives me hope for the future of Newberg is when I see young people who are good-hearted people who love others, When you see love in people's lives, they're demonstrating it by how they treat other people. That gives me hope. That gives me hope. I'm a father of 4 sons. They're good young men. They have good friends. There's a great batch of young people in our community that are very loving to others, very accepting, and that gives me a lot of hope for our community. And I would say, Daniel, your podcast gives me hope. And I'm glad that you're doing the work you do. It's giving opportunity for these kinds of conversations to happen, which I think it gives me hope for our community.
Well, thank you, and thank you for all that you do. I know there's a lot more behind the scenes that you do that people are not aware of, but thank you for being so involved and so committed in all that you do.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Giving Town podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing it with a friend who you think might benefit from hearing it. While more and more people are continuing to hear about this podcast, I still need your help to spread the message about all the people and organizations that make Newberg so great. Well, thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next episode.